Hey everyone, I'm T-Rex and today I'm going to be doing my first movie review. As usual, I don't really know what to do in the background, so I'm going to have some Wonder Woman gameplay from Injustice 2. Just so you know, I'm pretty bad, so don't really pay attention to that. But anyway, let's just talk about Wonder Woman 1984, and this is, in case you're wondering, a non-spoiler review. Now, just a point of reference, I really enjoyed the first Wonder Woman movie. I might do a review on it someday in the future, but coming into this movie, I was a very big fan of this movie, and I was really excited to see that Patty Jenkins, the director of the first Wonder Woman, is able to come back in the directing chair for the sequel. It is also very apparent that she had a lot more creative freedom with this movie, as her being credited as a screenwriter and a story consultant, so in this movie she had a much larger role in telling the story. Now, since we're talking about the story, let's just start talking about the narrative. And Wonder Woman 84 is a plot that I'd say is a lot bigger in scale than the first Wonder Woman movie. The ideas and things that are going on are just a lot bigger in scope. The actual story I thought was actually a pretty interesting idea. It's a really big idea, so the movie definitely needed somewhat of a longer runtime so that they could be able to explain it. But on that note, I don't think the pacing was as great. I had a few scenes in my eyes that I felt weren't really needed. I think they could have trimmed some of the fat off this movie to really make it feel like it is moving at a better pace. Because as it stands, Wonder Woman 1984 feels like a much longer movie than the first one, even though the runtime is like 7 minutes longer. I think when it comes to the main story, a few scenes could have been reworked or retooled so that they could be able to cut the runtime a little shorter. When it comes to the main plotline, I thought there were some little issues, but I didn't think it was really no big issues really for me. But when it comes to the subplots, I think there are some big issues. I think the Barbara Minerva plotline, it's the character played by Kristen Wiig, who we see metamorphosized into a villain. I think setting her up in a villain wasn't the best idea for this movie. I think there were so many other plotlines, and the ideas they were tackling were so big that this didn't feel necessary to be in this story. I'm not saying that setting up Barbara Minerva to be a villain is a bad idea. I just think that in this movie, we already have a great villain, and I just don't think we needed her, because it really brings down the film when we have to keep cutting back to this second villain that we're setting up for a final boss fight, which isn't really a spoiler because it's in the trailer. They show so much of this movie in the trailer. I just think maybe we could have had her as this quirky sidekick in this movie, and then the next movie we could have seen that metamorphosis, and it maybe would have been a little bit more heart-wrenching and more satisfying to see her character fully go that way, instead of just being a sub-villain in this movie. I'm not saying that the character is bad, I just didn't feel like that plotline really needed to be in the movie, because I think this really affected the pacing and how long this movie felt. Because on a character level, I think they actually did a pretty good job with Barbara Minerva. It's just, I just didn't think that her character needed to be in this movie. Now, when it comes to the characters, I think most of them are good. I think Wonder Woman is still great in this movie, and her character still feels like the same person from the last one. She's definitely the standout. It's great to see Wonder Woman, and she's still great. Same with our villain, Maxwell Lord. He is a good villain. He just feels a little cheesy or campy. The movie is not as serious as the original movie. Even in the first few scenes, I immediately noticed it. Instead of feeling like a movie that came out in 2020 and is set in the 80s, it feels like a movie that's set in 1984 that was released in 1984, like the Dawn or Superman movies. It's not bad, it's just I was surprised that the plot and the characters kind of felt like they were playing into that 1980s sort of cheesy nostalgia when it comes to these type of movies. Not that it's bad, it was just a different tone than I expected for them to go at. But anyway, as I was saying, I thought that Wonder Woman was great and Maxwell Lord were absolutely fantastic. I thought that Chris Pine as Steve Trevor was okay. He didn't feel as he had as much to do in the plot, but you know, it's kind of the same thing with Kristen Wiig's character with Barbara Minerva, where it goes, the characters are pretty fun, but I don't know if they had so much to do with this film and if their arcs were fully developed. I think that the acting on a whole is pretty good from all of them. It just felt like some of these characters didn't have that much to do, or what they were doing really bogged down the main plot. But on a performance level, I think Gal Gadot is pretty great in this as the original Wonder Woman. I think everyone gives really good performances. It's just that some of the characters like Steve Trevor and Barbara Minerva didn't really feel as if they had something really to do or contribute helpfully to the plot. It kind of felt like it was nice that they were there, but when it came to them actually developing and helping the plot, I just didn't think that their characters were written and helped them in that way. Luckily, good performances from the entire cast kind of makes you overlook that, but when you look at the writing standpoint, Steve Trevor didn't have a lot to do, unlike the first movie where he had a lot to do, and Barbara Minerva, I just think her entire plotline really slowed down the pacing of the film. Now, when it comes to visuals, I think there's a lot to talk about in this film. And this film is a very bright film. It like pops off the screen when you're watching it, and it's shot for the most part, very well. The main problem is the visual effects do not always work. If you watch the trailer, this is not a spoiler, but Full Cheetah is in this movie. I thought she was standing still. She sort of looked fine. But when she is in motion, it looked like a video game cutscene of two characters colliding with each other. It just looked really digital, and I didn't know how to think of it until I just saw him swinging around, and I went, this feels like a video game cutscene. And the fights in this movie are also not the best. I think it's very easy to see when the people are on wires, because when they get punched, they go in a directly straight line. It's kind of hilarious. Like, you can see them flying towards the wall. Like, guys get punched in, like, perfectly straight lines, and I usually am pretty easy to suspend my disbelief, but once I noticed that, I was taken out of the movie for a second. I just think that this movie is shot well, and the colors are great, and it pops. It's just the visual effects sometimes just needed some touch-up, just so that it could look a little bit better. Now, I'm going to talk about the villain and Maxwell Lord. I think he's a huge step up over the villain when it came to the last Wonder Woman movie. Instead of getting a surprise villain at the end who is just evil for being evil, I think we have a much more interesting villain who's driven by a lot more interesting factors. And it's really interesting to see him because he isn't a villain that can go toe-to-toe with Wonder Woman. So it's really fun to be able to see how he thinks around her and trying to do his best to succeed with his plan. Same thing goes with the third act of this movie, where I think it greatly surpasses the original Wonder Woman movie, because I think the final confrontation has a lot more emotion because this villain has been set up much better. I think Wonder Woman has been set up very well, and it really is good, except there are a few questions that are not really answered that well in the third act that I think should have been explained a bit more. Because if you think about it, you go, wait, is this what happened, or did they need this to happen for it to do that? Like, you just needed a little bit more explanation, because as I was asking people I know, what do you think happened, and it's just everyone has a different answer because they didn't really explain it that well. So it kind of makes you come to your own conclusions, I guess, but I wish they could have just explained it a little bit more. Well, on the whole, when it comes to the movie, I'm kind of conflicted. I like some things in here a lot. I think Wonder Woman is awesome in this movie, and I think she has done very well here. I think that the villain in this movie has greatly surpassed the original, but I think this movie at the end of the day has pretty great characters and a very interesting premise tackling massive ideas. But being so big, it could have benefited from a little less side plots and a more trimmed movie to explain the intricate parts, so that way we can understand things, and maybe if it could have trimmed up a little bit, we could have had a much better paced film. I think on a whole, there are a lot of big improvements on the first film, but along the way, they kind of forgot the fundamentals that made the original movie so good. Overall, I am going to say that Wonder Woman 1984 is an okay movie. You might think that I was going to go lower with what I said in this review, but I had a lot of fun with the characters. The villains are great, and there are a lot of fun action scenes and ideas, and this film is pretty well shot, and it's fun to see these characters again. But there were just some things that I had some issues with, the cheetah and feeling unnecessary, and the film feeling long. But those are just some of the things that bogged it down. Remember, these are all just my opinions. If you enjoyed the movie, I'm not trying to take away from you. I'm just voicing my opinions. And if you're wondering, should I go check out Wonder Woman 1984? Well, if you enjoyed the first one, you probably will enjoy a lot of things and be happy leaving the theater. I had some issues with it. I think it's definitely worth going to see. But if you had some issues with the first one or just a little nervous, it is on HBO Max if you want to go stream it there. That way, if you didn't like it, it's not that big of a loss because it's about the same going to a movie theater, $15 or whatever. So, anyway, if you liked this video, you can leave a like. And if you want to talk about your different opinions, leave them in the comments section. My opinion isn't right, it's just my opinion. So if you have any different ideas of what you thought about the movie, leave it. I'd love to talk about this movie. Anyway, if you want to stick around, you can subscribe. And right now, I'm trying to figure out OBS on my computer. But if I can, I'm going to try to do a Star Wars ranking of all the movies, because I've been talking about Star Wars recently. It's going to be like a tier list sort of thing where I'll put them on a tier. I'll show you the tiers and what I think they are, and then I'll rank them at the end. So hopefully I'm able to do that. I'm not going to set a date for me, because this time I know that there are a lot of moving parts with this. So hopefully I'm able to get it up soonish. So anyway, if I can figure that out, I'll see you then, or in another video if I can't figure it out. But anyway, see you guys. Bye.